Today we are going to explore some music from southern India. This is a Carnatic music performance, played on a stringed instrument known as the veena and a drum called the mridangam. I have to give you a little background first to provide some of the context you'll need in order to understand what this music is about. A good many of the richly varied religions in India are grouped under the broad umbrella known as Hinduism. There is no one single Hinduism. Different regions of India follow all kinds of different devotional practices, and it's kind of impossible to generalize about those practices, although what they all seem to have in common is a thoroughly worked out system of karma and reincarnation, which play great shaping roles in a generalized worldview of India. And they are essentially monistic. I'll have more to say about that in the next lecture. One of the reasons for Hinduism's great variety is the incursion of Aryan invaders into the Indian subcontinent about 1700 BCE, in other words, about 3,700 years ago. These invaders were light-skinned equestrian warriors from the Caucasus region in Central Asia. Like most Bronze and Iron Age cultures, the gods of the Aryans were a reflection of their worldview and way of life, which is why so many of their gods were warriors and rode horseback. Their religion also involved a system of elaborate rituals that included animal sacrifice, characteristic also of many other religions at the time, with the religion of the Torah, or Old Testament, a no doubt familiar example. And their holy books, known as the Vedas, included many hymns to their deities. When the Aryans came through the Khyber Pass, crossed the Indus River, and overran the lands to the south and east, they took their religion with them. And as they steadily subjugated the native people, their own religion came to dominate the region, although the religious sensibilities of the indigenous people, the Dravidians, eventually percolated through those once alien religions. By about 500 BCE, India underwent a great change of mind, and a new set of teachings, heavily indebted both to the sacrificial religion of the Aryans and the more philosophical religion of the Dravidians, emerged in the form of sacred scriptures known as the Upanishads, wherein a full-fledged system of karma and reincarnation was set forth, the adoption of which yielded not only modern Hinduism, but had a profound impact on Buddhism and Jainism, which emerged at the same time as well. In the southern part of India, many people devote their entire lives to the worship of a particular deity, and one of their favorites is Saraswati, goddess of music and learning. I've always been fond of that pairing, by the way. I sense a deep connection between music and learning. Learning to think about music will shed light on much else besides. Many of those who venerate Saraswati play the veena, a musical instrument that is commonly associated with her. It's a large, plucked stringed instrument with a pear-shaped body, which is why it's regarded as a member of the lute family. The lute, by the way, appears to have originated in the Arabian Peninsula, where it was known as al-ud. In the mouths of Europeans, who later had their own version of the same instrument, that name was contracted to lute. The versions that found their way east took other names, such as sitar and veena. If you've ever seen a mandolin, you've seen a treble lute. Its pear-shaped body gives it away. This instrument, the veena, has 7 strings. 4 of them are tuned by the pegs in the peg box at the top of the instrument's neck, and 3 of them are tuned by the pegs on the side of the neck. The 4 primary strings are used for making melody, while the other 3 are used only to produce a constant drone known as the shruti. You may be familiar with the sound of the sitar, which is more likely to be heard in northern India, for which I'll supply some musical examples later. That instrument has a very bright, shimmering, silvery tone. The veena sounds very different. Its sound is rich, dark, and very warm. In performance, the veena is often paired with the mridangam, a drum with a barrel-shaped body carved from jackwood. The drum sits across the seated player's lap, and the player plays both heads. Those heads are made of multiple layers of leather, and one of them has a deep booming sound. The player uses the fingertips as drumsticks. This allows the artist to play passages of fantastic speed and virtuosity. In southern India, there really isn't a distinction made between classical music and sacred music, as often exists in the West, with some overlap taken into consideration. Here, classical and sacred are pretty much one and the same. The music is called Carnatic music, and it's always dedicated to a god or goddess. The centerpiece of a Carnatic performance is a pre-composed hymn to that deity, which is introduced by an extended improvisation during which the melodic content of the hymn will be examined. After the hymn has been played, the performance continues and concludes with another extended improvisation. The piece we're going to hear in this video is of that sort and follows that scheme. I need to introduce some useful terms, and then we'll hear a performance of Saraswati, a hymn dedicated to the goddess Saraswati. The first is raga. The raga is essentially a collection of notes and melodic formulae that will be used in the piece. Those notes can, of course, be arranged as a scale, so in a sense, raga is roughly equivalent to scale, although the idea of raga is more complicated than that. I'll return to that in the next lecture. There are 72 basic ragas in the music of India, and the one used in Saraswati is known as Natai raga. You'll soon hear it. The next term is tala. While much Western music is organized in measures of equal length, music in India is organized in cycles of time, known as tala. The cycle of time chosen for a particular piece will always have the same number of beats and the same pattern of stressed and unstressed beats, so it too is more complicated than its Western counterpart. The tala of Saraswati is 8 beats long. It is known as Adi Tala. You won't hear the tala until after the raga has been thoroughly introduced and the hymn itself begins. A third term is sruti, which is a word for the ubiquitous drone that pervades the entire piece. In this recording, it's the first thing you'll hear and the last thing you'll hear, and it is presented at all times from beginning to end. In music played on the veena, the instrument itself is equipped to provide its own drone. To do it, the player occasionally plucks or brushes those 3 sruti strings that share the neck of the instrument with its 4 melodic strings. The sruti is considered essential in music of India. Music without it would be as unthinkable as a painting without a canvas. The last term you'll need to know is kriti. A kriti is a hymn to a god or goddess. The kriti is always the centerpiece of a Carnatic music performance and the only part that is not improvised. The piece you're going to hear is called Saraswati because its centerpiece is a hymn by that name, dedicated to the goddess Saraswati. The veena player in this recording is Ms. Ranganayaki Rajagopalan, who has played the veena since her studies began at age 4 and has devoted her entire life to Saraswati and the hymns dedicated to her. She was over 75 years old when she made this recording. The mridangam player is Srimushnam V. His artistry and virtuosity are absolutely astonishing. Before we hear the piece, let's take a look at this roadmap of the performance. Everything to the left of the vertical line is introductory. It's an exposition of the Natai raga in 2 parts called Alapana and Tanam. The Alapana section is in free rhythm. The raga is explored in a leisurely way, starting from a position low in the veena's range and gradually moving higher, reaching its peak and descending again. You'll often hear a kind of wiggle on some of the extended notes. Those ornaments are actually part of the raga itself. When the alapana has run its course, the improvised exposition continues, but with a noticeable pulse added. This is the tanam section, and is organized in a quite different way from the alapana. I've provided some guidance through its structure. See if you can hear in it the things that I'm pointing out in my commentary. As the tanam draws to its close, a little bit of the alapana-style music returns to finish this long improvised introduction in a very satisfying way. One might say a classical way, as the music has started here, gone there, and come back here. Note that the mridangam, the drum, is silent during this entire introduction. To the right of the vertical line lies the main body of the performance. First we hear the hymn itself, the kriti. It's a fairly long one, organized in an A-B-A-C-A pattern, with its A sections setting forth a distinctive three-note head motive that exercises a notable shaping effect on the performance as a whole. It is with the beginning of the hymn that the mridangam player enters and plays to the end of the performance. It is here also that the 8-beat aditala kicks in. When the hymn has run its course, we hear a long improvisatory passage called kalpana svaras. It's worth noting at this point that, in India, classical musicians enjoy roughly the same degree of creative freedom as jazz artists in the West. That is, improvisation is part and parcel of any performance. That's obviously not true of classical musicians in the West, who are mostly bound, even by contract, to play the notes on the page exactly as printed. This deep difference reflects, of course, a deep difference of worldview in the two cultures, about which I'll have a great deal to say in the next lecture. The Kalpanasvaras explores a great deal of musical territory. It is a passage shaped by the imagination of the performers in the moment, and when it has run its course, the drummer gets his time in the sun. This is the Tani Avartanam, during which the veena player provides only the ubiquitous drone, the shruti. The drum solo ends with the fourfold iteration of a distinctive cadential pattern, and a little bit of the kriti, just its first phrase, returns at the end to lay the whole to rest in much the same way that a little bit of the alapana returned to put the finishing touches on the introduction. I hope you enjoy the performance.